Hello, I'm from the team that created an interactive animated series for preschoolers featuring a magical talking orb. Recently, we asked you guys for help deciding what kind of special abilities our orb would have, and you blew us away with your creativity. Now, we want to show you what we came up with based on all your great suggestions. So let's dive right in. Okay, so the first thing we wanted to talk about is how your suggestions really helped us decide what kind of show this was going to be. So back when we were first coming up with the idea for this show, we had some different ideas for what the orb might do. Some of us thought maybe it could make potions, or maybe it was a crystal ball. But after hearing all your ideas, we realized there were three things that kept coming up over and over again: portals, transformations, and magic spells. So we decided to combine them all into one superpowered orb that can do all three. Here's an early animatic we put together before we started pre-production. As you can see, we also wanted to make sure the show focused on themes of kindness and friendship, like if the orb only does something if someone's being nice or helping others. This became very clear when so many of you mentioned how important those values were to you in your responses. Okay, now let's take a peek at how we brought it all together. So the first step in pre-production is storyboarding. Our storyboard artist takes these initial animatics and breaks them down frame by frame, kind of like a comic book. Then our production team looks over the storyboards to make sure everything flows well and that the pacing is good. One thing we noticed was that we needed to add more scenes where our characters could learn new skills or gain knowledge. So instead of just having the orb randomly transport them to different places, we added scenes where they have to interact with the environment to figure out how to get home. For example, in the jungle riddle scene, we knew we wanted to include some kind of challenge, where Loki had to use his noggin to figure something out. So we came up with the wise old tree who gives him a riddle to solve. That way he doesn't just stand around waiting for the answer. Instead, he has to think about it and use logic. As soon as storyboards are approved, it's time to move on to the next phase, which is called production. That's when we bring the storyboards to life by adding color, sound effects, and backgrounds. The hardest part of production is making the animations look seamless. It took us months to perfect the way the orb flies around and reacts to its surroundings. We didn't want it to feel like Loki was just floating in space. We wanted to make sure the environments were detailed enough to feel immersive, but not so busy that the audience got distracted from the main action. So now let us check out some of the scenes you've seen throughout this video and hear how they came to life. Okay. Let's start with the space surprise scene. Before we began production, we sat down as a team to think about how we could make the most of the wacky possibilities of outer space. We knew we wanted to include some kind of puzzle or challenge that tested the kids' observation skills. So we brainstormed a list of objects that could be fun to animate in zero gravity. And that's when someone suggested a rocket ship. We all loved the idea of a goofy alien stranded in Loki's world, so we ran with it. Another thing we wanted to add was some kind of reward for solving the puzzle, so we came up with a shooting star that gives the orb a shiny effect. We hope that adds a sense of accomplishment and makes the kids feel like they're actually interacting with the characters. Another scene we were excited to animate was the jungle riddle, because it gave us a chance to showcase some beautiful environments and introduce a wise old character who could teach Loki something new. Here's a tip for aspiring animators. When animating animals or plants, it helps to exaggerate their features to make them more expressive. Take the wise old tree, for example. We made his roots flow like flowing robes, and his branches sway like arms to emphasize his wisdom and age. And finally, let's take a look at the underwater adventure scene. One of the biggest challenges of this scene was making sure the lighting and colors felt believable underwater. We did a lot of research on how light interacts with water and how it affects the way objects appear. We also wanted to make sure the camera movements were smooth and didn't feel shaky or disorienting. That's why we used a technique called match moving, which involves tracking the movement of a real camera to make sure it looks realistic. Now let's switch gears and talk about how you can bring interactivity into your own projects. In the next segment, we'll explain how our writers use the power of choice to keep kids engaged. Okay, so the whole point of making an interactive show is to give the audience some kind of control over what happens. That's why we included branching paths in our script, where the audience gets to choose which direction the story goes in. But just having choices isn't enough. We had to make sure each path was equally engaging and satisfying. So our writers worked closely with our animators to brainstorm creative ways to make each option feel like a complete adventure. For example, in the Coral Kingdom scene, we could have just made both paths lead to the same place. But instead, we made one path lead to a secret treasure chest and the other path lead to a funny seahorse doing a magic trick. That way, no matter which option viewers choose, they'll still feel like they're making progress and discovering new things. We hope that makes our show more exciting and encourages kids to explore all the different paths and make their own choices along the way. Now let's chat about how we made the show educational without being preachy. One way we did this was by incorporating interactive moments that test kids' observation skills. For example, in the Turtle Talk scene, we encourage kids to count the number of fish they see in the coral reef. That way they can learn while they play and feel accomplished when they discover the answer. Another thing we did was work with a team of early childhood educators to develop lessons that aligned with our show's themes. For example, in the Wise Old Tree scene, we worked with educators to develop a lesson on problem solving that can be used in classrooms or at home. We believe learning should be fun and engaging, so we try to incorporate interactive elements and educational content seamlessly into our show. In the next segment, we'll show you how we incorporated your suggestions into the final product. So as we were developing the show, we kept your suggestions in mind every step of the way. When we were brainstorming the orb's powers, we considered your feedback on what you liked and didn't like about similar shows. We also read through all your comments and looked at the artwork you shared with us. That's why the orb can do things like transform into different animals, open portals to different worlds, and even turn Loki's room into a magical playground. We also tried to make sure the show had a positive message and taught kids about kindness, friendship, and bravery. So overall, your suggestions were incredibly helpful in shaping the show and making it something that we're proud of and that we think kids will love. And now it's time for another interactive moment. We want you to help us decide what Loki should do next. Should he explore the desert or go on a jungle adventure? Make your voice heard in the comments below. Okay, now it's time to wrap things up. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you for watching, and until next time, happy adventuring. Bye.